What's going on, guys? Welcome to another tank video. Today we're going to be having a look at a Dragonknight tank guide. We're going to go through everything from why the Dragonknight has been used for so many years, primarily as a tank for PvE. Also why it's used for beginners, what makes it a great choice for beginners when they're learning to tank, and why it's still used by so many in the end game by experienced tanks for trial and dungeon content. We're going to look in depth at all of the skills and all of the passives, which are primarily the things that separate it from the other classes. We're also going to go through the race. First of all, the one that I would choose as my primary choice and a backup as well as an alternative. We're going to have a look at all of the consumables, including the food and the pot choices that you have as a tank. And then we're also going to have a look briefly through the Mundus stone and the champion points that you can run as well. Gear, I probably won't go into too much detail on during this video, as the gear is going to change quite significantly depending on the content that you're doing. However, in the description of the video I will give some gear choices, depending on what sort of content that it is that you want to be doing, whether it's dungeons, arenas, trials. I will give plenty of options in there for that. As always, if you find the video useful, please do leave a like on the video, please subscribe to the channel, and feel free to leave a comment as well if you have any questions for me about the video or anything else tank related. So first of all, what is the reason why the Dragonknight is such a popular choice for tanks of basically all experience when it comes to PvE? The Dragonknight's always been used as a tank for many years, and it's been used in a range of PvE content, from arenas to dungeons all the way to trials as well. It can be used by all levels, from those who are first looking to start out tanking as a beginner in their first tank, and also those who are very experienced doing the hardest of content on the game. There's a few different aspects ultimately that make a good tank. First of all, we want something that's going to be tanky, something with a lot of resistances, something that has a lot of damage mitigation. That's one of the most important things as a tank, because obviously we don't want to be dying. We're the person that needs to be staying alive in the group, the one that needs to hold all of the adds, all of the bosses, without taking too much damage and dying. So that's the first most important thing. The second thing that we're going to be looking at is that we can sustain that. So we don't want to just hold a boss for a few seconds and then die. We need to be constantly managing our resources, making sure we're not running out of stamina, of magicka, and certainly not of health either. So the sustain is the second kind of most important factor that we need to consider when we're deciding a good tank. And then finally, the third most important thing would be the buffs that we have available to our group. A tank is part of your group's supports, so you have your tanks and your healers, and tanks are very important when it comes to buffing your group. And as on the Dragonknight, we have access to a lot of really great buffs for that as well. So how does the Dragonknight tank measure up to these 3 points? Well, first of all, from a tankiness point of view, we've got access to some great skills that we're going to go through, and we've also got access to a number of really useful passives, such as Scaled Armour and Iron Skin as well, which are going to give us block mitigation, and they're also going to help us get to our resistance cap as well. From a sustain point of view, we've also got a number of skills and ways that we set ourselves up to help our sustain. But on top of that, we have access to, again, a number of passives that are going to be helping boost our sustain, ones such as the Helping Hands and the Battle Roar passive, for instance. The final thing that really makes the Dragonknight stand out as a tank is the fact that it does have access to so many, not just buffs, but unique buffs as well. So first of all, it's providing minor brutality through its passives, and then on top of that, it's got access to a number of skills, such as Stone Fist, such as Engulfing Flames, and also on top of that, Igneous Weapons, which is going to give major sorcery and brutality to our entire group whenever we use it. So looking into the skills for the Dragonknight, of our 3 skill lines we have Ardent Flame, which is kind of like a DPS skill line, Draconic Power, which is essentially a tanking skill line, and then Earthen Heart, which contains a load of sort of support skills and such. So with Ardent Flame, most of the skills in this skill line we're not going to be using as a tank. So we have our standard, which is our ultimate. Again, we're not going to be using this much. Lava Whip is sort of a DPS spammable. Searing Strike, which is a dot, and Inferno, which is another dot essentially. The two, however, that we are going to be using from this skill line are Fiery Breath and Fiery Grip. So first of all, Fiery Breath is essentially your character breathes fire in front of you and applies flame damage to all of the enemies that are immediately in front of you. Both morphs can be used on this. Noxious Breath will give major breach to all of the adds that you apply the flame breath to in front of you. However, we're probably going to prefer to use Caltrops for our major breach area of effect if we want to run that. The Caltrops has a bigger area and also costs less as well. So most of the time we're not going to use that on a tank. We're instead going to use this, Engulfing Flames, and the difference that this gives is when you breathe the fire on the enemies in front of you, you're also going to be making them take more flame damage. Now, a lot of the DDs in your group, whether you're doing dungeons or whether you're doing trials, they're going to be using some sort of flame damage. Often they'll have an Inferno staff or they'll have flame skills slotted on their bars. And so a lot of the time you will be benefiting quite a lot for your group by running this Engulfing Flame skill, and it is specific to a Dragonknight. So often you will have at least one Dragonknight in your group running this, whether it's you as a tank or another DD. So we're going to be running Engulfing Flames on that skill quite a lot of the time. Fiery Grip, we're going to be morphing this to Unrelenting Grip. What this is going to be is our ad control skill. So whenever we use it, we're going to pull ads in from a distance. So if you've got ads on ad packs that are quite far out of the group, you can use this on them and chain them in. An alternative is to run Silver Leash, which you often run on the other tank classes. However, on a DK, we'll normally run Unrelenting Grip because it also gives you movement speed as well from the major expedition, and it's also going to be proccing your combustion passive. Because it's flame damage, you are applying burning to an enemy whenever you use this skill. So these are the two skills that we're mostly going to use from Ardent Flame. In terms of the passives, they're all useful, so all have them in. However, the main one that's notable on Ardent Flame is the combustion passive. It's given us 1000 magicka whenever we apply burning to an enemy, and it's given us 1000 stamina whenever we apply poison to an enemy. So this is basically just a nice one that's going to constantly be helping our sustain here and there. We proc the burning side of this aspect with Unrelenting Grip, as we spoke about, and then we proc the poison side of it to get our 1k stamina back, usually by using a poison glyph on our front bar, and we'll often have a charge trait on that to help apply this more often. In terms of Draconic Power, most of these skills are useful for a tank, so we're not going to be using the ultimate. This is only really used in PvP, to be honest. Spiked Armor is one that we will quite often use. You've got two ways of getting your Major Resolve on a DK tank. Major Resolve is what's going to give us almost 6k of our resistances. So we're going to get 6k physical and spell resistance when we get Major Resolve. This is the first way to get it. The other way is by using Balance from the Mage's Guild skill line. Most of the time I will run Balance. The benefit of using Balance is when we use it to get our physical and spell resistance, we're also going to get magic back, so it's going to be helping our mag sustain, essentially giving us infinite mag sustain, especially if we have a healer in the group. The reason why we want a healer in the group is because balance is going to cost health to use. So whilst it gives us magicka back, it's actually costing us some of our health to use that skill. Whereas spiked armor does not cost health, it costs magicka. But then again, it's taking a toll on your mag sustain, so it's going to depend on what situation that you're in, depending on which one you're going to use. The other nice one about spiked armor, and we're going to morph it to hardened armor, is that you get a damage shield as well. So we're getting our physical and spell resistances, and we're also getting this nice damage shield as well, but it does cost magicka, so it's not going to help your mag sustain. Dark Talons is another one that we are going to use, and the one that we will be using most of the time is Choking Talons. So this has less cost, and the enemies that you use it to deal less damage, and this is also another ad control skill. So what this is going to do is prevent them moving, so it immobilizes them. So you normally would cast it in sort of a group of adds, and it prevents them from then moving away. Often you'll chain adds in and then they'll just immediately run off, whereas if you chain them in and use this, then they're stuck in place, which will help them to be killed quicker. Dragon Blood is going to be our main self-heal on a Dragonknight. Now, Green Dragon Blood recently got a bit of a buff. It now has a heal over time with it as well. Which morph you use is debatable at the moment. Coagulating Blood has been used on tanks most recently, but with the new buff to Green Dragon Blood, the two are definitely debatable, and which one you choose is really going to depend on your playstyle and how you set your tank up. So first of all, let's understand what each one does. So Green Dragon Blood will heal you for a percentage of your missing life, and on top of that will give you a heal over time as well. So if, for instance, you've got 40k health and you're on 10% health, so you only have 4k health, this will heal you for 35% or 34% essentially of that missing health. So of that 36k health, you'll get a third of that back. So it's going to be basically a 12k heal. And then on top of that, you're also going to get the 1k health every second over 5 seconds as well. Now, Coagulating Blood, rather than healing you based on your missing health, it's going to heal you by a set amount based on your primary resource. So that's often going to be, for instance, your stamina. So if you have high max stamina, then this will heal you by X amount based on how high your stamina is, and that value can increase by another 50% depending on how much health you're missing. So if you compare the two, Green Dragon Blood ultimately is going to give you a bigger burst heal when you're on lower health, whereas Coagulating Blood is going to give you a more consistent amount of healing based on how high your primary resource is, like stamina. Now, a lot of the time I run quite high health, maybe 40k plus, especially in trials, and my stamina will usually be relatively low. So for instance, maybe 22, 23,000, like low 20s. So for that reason, I most of the time will run Green Dragon Blood. I prefer to need the big burst healing when I'm on lower health, and with the heal over time that you now get as well, I find that this is way more beneficial for me, and it is the one that I prefer to use most of the time. Coagulating Blood, I would run it if I have less than 40k health, perhaps somewhere around 37k, maybe if I'm doing dungeons, and I just want a nice sort of consistent amount of healing even when I'm on fairly high health. So if you have higher stamina and slightly lower health, for instance maybe 25k plus stamina and around 37k health, Coagulating Blood is probably the better option. However, if you've got higher health, maybe 40k plus, and you're low 20k's in the stamina, then I would run Green Dragon Blood as your choice for that. In terms of the passives, and actually just before we do passives, Protective Scale and Inhale, I haven't unlocked these because they are very situational. Protective Scale is going to reduce the amount of damage you take from projectiles, and you might want to use this if you're, for instance, main tanking Cloud Rest. But a lot of the time, we're not going to slot this. It is situational. Just like Inhale, when you morph this to the Deep Breath morph, what this is going to do is interrupt enemies that are around you. It is a very useful skill, especially in, for instance, Kind's Aegis, where you have a lot of infusers around you, or Black Rose Prison, that are basically channeling an interrupt mechanic at the same time. This will interrupt them all at the same time as long as they're within a suitable range of you. So it is situational, but most of the time we're not going to be using it. In terms of the passives for Draconic Power, we have some really important ones for tanking. So first of all, we have Iron Skin. This is going to increase the amount of damage that you block by 10%, which for obvious reasons is very useful on a tank. We have Burning Heart. This is just going to give us more healing received, again also very useful on a tank. We get extra health recovery from the Elder Dragon passive, And then we also get our physical and spell resistances increased from scaled armor. So this is going to help go towards our resistance cap. Earthen Heart, this is more of a support skill line, as I mentioned. So we have various skills doing quite different things. First of all, the ulti is very unique, I would say, on a Dragonknight. We're going to morph this most of the time to Magma Shell. Corrosive Armor can be used, but more in PvP, I would say. So Magma Shell is mostly what we're going to use this for, and this is essentially a panic button, really, I would say. So when you use it, you're going to be pretty much invincible for 12 seconds. It just reduces the damage that you take, so the maximum damage you actually take is 3% of your max health. So if you're getting hit by lots of things, your health still can go down, but for the most part, if you use this, you're going to be unkillable for a period of time. It's very good for beginners, it's very good for anyone that's learning something new on their Dragonknight Tank. It is a very useful ultimate. Stonefist, this is also a very unique skill to a Dragonknight. What this is going to do, and we're going to be morphing it to Stone Giant first of all. So what this is going to do is every time you use it, you're going to put stagger on the enemy that you apply it to. Now this can stack up to 3 times, and for each stack that it has on the enemy, you're increasing the damage that they take. So this is quite often used by a main tank in trial or dungeon situations. So it's a very nice skill to use. It's one of the kind of main buff skills for a Dragonknight tank. So a lot of the time we'll use this. However, it is risky, especially for new tanks, because when you first use the skill, it will drop your block for a second. So if you use it at the wrong time, during a heavy attack for instance, you will die. So use it carefully, use it when you're experienced. Even if you're not, definitely have a go with it, but just be very careful using it at the wrong time. Molten weapons, we will be morphing to igneous weapons. This is going to give our entire group Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, which is a very important group buff. So usually if you have a Dragonknight tank in your group, they are going to be running this. So this is definitely worth using. Obsidian Shield, we're going to be morphing to Igneous Shield. Again, Fragmented can be used, but it's often in PvP, or used to be. Igneous Shield is the one that we're going to want to run. This is going to give us a little damage shield every time we use it. It does also give everyone else in our group a small damage shield as well. The one that you get is quite a bit bigger. I use this very often on a DK tank. I use it before I take a heavy attack. I use it while I have lots of incoming damage on me. And the other time when you're going to want to use it is to proc your Help Enhance passive, because every time you use it, you're going to get 1k stamina back. So what you can do is you can essentially spam Igneous Shield to get your stamina back up, and then if you're running balance from the Major Guild skill line, you can then use that to get your magic back up. So you essentially have infinite sustain on the Dragonknight in that way, as long as you have a healer then that's healing you back up. Otherwise you then have to spend your magic again using a self-heal. Petrify and Ash Cloud, these are, well, Petrify is not really used so much, more in PvP, it's a stun, so we're not going to use this really on a Dragonknight tank. Ash Cloud we're also not going to use most of the time, but it can be used. You can see I don't really use it, but there is a healing morph to this whenever you put it down, and it gives a small heal over time to you and your allies that are within the area. So in terms of the passives that we have on the Earthen Heart skill line, so these ones are really important to a Dragonknight tank. They're kind of part of what defines it and makes it as good as it is. So this one is just a passive. It increases the duration of your abilities. The Battle Roar is a huge passive. So whenever you cast an ultimate ability while you're in combat, you're going to restore a huge amount of health, stamina and mag, depending on how expensive the ultimate was that you used. So basically, whenever you play on a Dragonknight and you pop an ultimate, you're going to get a huge amount of your resources back, which is extremely useful, and it goes a long way towards why a Dragonknight tank is so good with sustain. Same with a Dragonknight DD for that matter, or even a healer. This passive is really, really useful, even if you're not in a situation where you need to use your ultimate to help your group at a particular time. If you're in a panic moment and you're low on a particular resource, particularly your health, and you pop this, you're going to get everything back and it's going to save your life. So it's a really important passive to take note of. Mountain's Blessing is a specific Dragonknight buff that's going to help you in your group. This is going to apply minor brutality to you and your group, which is going to increase your weapon damage by 10%. It's also going to give ultimate as well. This can only occur every 6 seconds. The Helping Hands passive is the one that we've already mentioned. So whenever you cast an Earthen Heart ability, you're going to restore stamina, which is again going a long way towards helping our sustain on a Dragonknight tank. So very useful. The passives on a Dragonknight really are what make it such a good class to tank on. On the one hand and shield, all of these skills are useful at times, but the main two that we're going to be using is Puncture, which is our main melee taunt, and we're going to be morphing this to Pierce Armor, which is also going to give Minor Breach. So this is our major and minor breach source on our Dragonknight tank. Low Slash we'll use quite a lot, and we're going to put it on Heroic Slash. It's going to give us minor heroism, which gives our ultimate generation, and the Heroic Slash skill itself is going to apply minor maim to whatever we use it on. The other three are situational. Defensive Posture is going to give you a damage shield. You can morph this to either morph. Defensive Stance is going to reduce the cost of block. Absorb Missile is going to give you health back whenever the damage shield is absorbed by a projectile. Shield Charge, we're going to use this very rarely, but it can be used, for instance, on the last boss on VHOF. Halls of Fabrication, when you get knocked back, when you use this, you run straight back up to the enemy, and it prevents the boss from doing its jump. So again, very situational. Power Bash can be used to proc various sets that require a bash, things like Turning Tide. Whenever you use this, you're basically just doing damage, but by using it with a set that actually requires a bash attack, this can proc that as well. But again, it's very situational. This skill is also used with the Vatashuran Sword and Shield set as well. So if you are running that, you can use this skill, and whenever you use it, it will pull in enemies that are around you. So it's another set that's used basically for ad management, and Power Bash is the skill that you need to proc that. And we're going to want to make sure that we have all our passives on from the One Hand and Shield skill line. Destruction Staff, again, all of these skills can be used in certain situations. The two that we're going to consistently use are Elemental Blockade, which is going to be when you put an AoE down on the ground, you're going to be applying your Crusher enchant that you'll have slotted on your Ice Staff back bar. So this will be used to consistently proc that Crusher enchant, which reduces the resistances of the enemies that you apply it to. Destructive Touch these days is going to be your main back bar or range taunt. We're going to morph it to Destructive Clench. It's also going to apply Major Maim as well. And yeah, this is going to taunt enemies from a distance, so we're often going to use this on our back bar. The other three are situational again, so Force Shock can be morphed to Crushing Shock. This is going to be a single target interrupt, so if you've got certain situations where you as a tank need to interrupt an enemy from a distance where you're not close enough to bash it, then Crushing Shock is a nice skill that you're going to need to use, definitely worth using at times. Weakness of Elements is a single target major breach source, so we will often use this, and both morphs are kind of usable at the moment. Again, this is if you need to breach something from a distance, so maybe if you're doing VSS hard mode and you're range tanking Lockosits, you can throw Ellie Drain onto the boss. It's also used if you're main tanking VCR to Major Breach all of the crystals that you can't necessarily run up to and use your melee taunt on. And then Impulse is a skill that we often use. We morph to Pulsar, and this is going to reduce the max health of enemies around you. So we'll use this in kind of add pull situations where you want to reduce their health and allow your DDs to kill them quicker. Again, put all the passives into Destruction Staff. You want to have all of the armor passives in. You don't need Sneak. The one that I've not got in, it doesn't do anything for you as a tank. But all the other passives you want to put in, because we're generally going to be running 5 heavy, 1 light and 1 medium. So you want to have all your passives in to proc that. For Fighters Guild, we're not really going to be running any of the skills on here generally. Silver Bolts can be morphed to Silver Leash, which is a skill that's going to pull in adds from a distance. But as we said before, most of the time on a Dragonknight we're going to be running Unrelenting Grip, which is going to be our main ad control skill. The only passive really I run is this one, which gives us ultimate whenever you kill an enemy. On Mages Guild, the main skill that we're going to be using from this skill line is Equilibrium, and we're going to be morphing this to Balance. Now, a lot of the time this will be the skill I use to get my major resolve. The alternative, as we mentioned earlier, is to run Hardened Armor. The difference between the two is this one is going to give you Magicka back but will cost health, whereas Hardened Armor will give you a damage shield and not take any health from you, but it will cost Magicka. So which one you use really depends on what you need in most situations, but as a general kind of sustain help, I generally will run Balance unless I'm doing content that's giving me quite a lot of incoming damage, in which case I'll run Hardened Armor instead. You want to have all of the first 3 passives in here, not Persuasive Will, but the following 3. I am obviously missing a skill point here. I need to get my major skill to 9, but these first 3 are all worth running. The last one, not so much. You don't really need Empower on a tank, so put all of the first 3 passives into this. On Undaunted, Inner Fire is an alternative range taunt to our Frost Clench. We generally morph this to Inner Rage, but generally I use Frost Clench instead of Inner Rage now, so feel free to use it. I think it is a little bit cheaper, but it doesn't apply major maim, and it has, it's generally less used than Frost Clench now. But both passives you want to have in on Undaunted. This one's going to give you resources whenever you activate a synergy, and this one is going to increase your max health, stam and mag for each different weight of armor that you have on. And because we're now running 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium, we're running all 3 armor types, so we're going to get an extra 6% of our max resources, so definitely worth running. The final ones to look at are the Assault and Support. On Assault, we're going to be using the Ultimate War Horn, and we're going to morph this to Aggressive Horn. This is going to give major force to our group and also increase their max resources for a period of time. Vigor, we're going to use a lot of the time, particularly if we're running Powerful Assault. On our back bar, we'll use this. You can either proc that with Caltrops or with Vigor, but the other thing with Vigor is when we run Resolving, this is going to be our main source of minor resolve. So this is going to give us our last 3k of physical and spell resistances. So this is also worth running a lot of the time. As I say, on a DK, this is our main source of minor resolve. So we're often going to be using that. Caltrops, we're going to morph to Razor Caltrops. This is our main source of area major breach. Our taunt that we use is going to give major breach, but only to a single target. So by running Razor Caltrops, when we put this down on an ad pull, we're going to apply major breach to all of the enemies in the area. And then continuous attack is going to make our mount faster, which isn't going to do a lot for our tanking, but it's generally worth running for sort of ease of life, if you like. And finally, on support, we're going to be running Barrier, and we'll run the Replenishing Barrier morph, which is every time the ward is dissolved, you restore ultimate and magicka back. We're running this for two reasons. Number one is it is a nice skill in itself. It applies a barrier to you and your group, which can at times save your lives. Most of the time we won't run it. We'll run Warhorn in terms of the ultimate that we are actually using. However, by having this slotted on your front bar, which most of the time we're going to do, we're going to get the extra mag recovery bonus from the Magicka Aid passive ability on the support skill line. So a lot of the time we are going to be running this. If you're newer to tanking, I would probably get rid of this and instead run Magma Shell, just for that panic button that we talked about earlier. And then Revealing Flare is, I guess, the other one on the support skill line that we're going to use quite consistently. Just by having this slotted on your bar, you're going to get major protection. So whenever you have it slotted, the major protection will be there, reducing the damage that you take by 10%. I usually only have this slotted in trial situations where I'm taking serious damage, or dungeon situations where I'm taking a lot of damage. Most of the time you're not going to need to run this, but if you do have it slotted on your front bar, and it's just going to help to reduce that damage incoming on you. The other two skills above this, Purge and Guard, these are situational. Purge will use very rarely. You'll normally probably run it on a healer, to be honest, but it's just going to cleanse you and your group from certain effects that the game can put out. And then Guard is, again, probably not a skill that you'll often use. It's probably more going to be used on you in certain trial situations, which basically when someone applies this to you, part of the damage that you take is inflicted on them instead. So it's, yeah, they're very situational. You're probably not going to use them most of the time, but they're worth knowing about. And then, of course, you want to have the passives in from whatever race you are, in my case, Nord. You want to have the medicinal use passive in on alchemy, and you also want to go into provisioning and have Gourmand in as well, just to increase the duration of any food that you're eating. So your Bullet Sugar Skulls, your Hrothgar Smoked Bear Hunch, whatever it is that you're using for your buff food. So that's pretty much it for all of the skills that the Dragonknight has. Of course, these main three are the ones that separate the Dragonknight from the other tank classes. The passives and the unique buffs that the Dragonknight has make it stand out significantly as a tank. It is the reason why many people choose to run this in their group. It is also the reason why often it's used as a beginner's tank, or even for those that are more experienced. So we've been through all of the skills for the Dragonknight. What I'm also going to do is just flash up a few examples of some skill bar setups that I would run. So I'm going to put a beginner's skill bar setup. I'm going to do one for dungeon bosses and one for dungeon ads, and then I'm also going to do a trial skill bar setup as well. Obviously, this can vary quite significantly depending on the specific trial or the specific dungeon that you might be doing, but this is just a few examples so that those that are looking to start out with a DK have a bar setup that can work for them. And also those that are looking to step into dungeons or trials for the first time on a Dragonknight can also have an example of what might work quite well. So the rest of the stuff really covered in the video are not specific to a Dragonknight as such. This will be more common to all tank classes. So first of all, we're going to look at race. We're then also going to look at the consumables and the CP. Again, these are common to all classes, but I'm going to give my first and second choice of race. The CP that I run personally on blue, which I pretty much run all the time, and then some examples of the red slotted CP that you might run. So for race on the DK, my personal preference is to choose Nord. Nord has two main reasons why I think it is the best choice for a Dragonknight tank. First of all, with the passive that gives you ultimate. On a DK, ultimate generation is really beneficial. We've seen already from the skills and the passives on the skill lines that using an ultimate on a Dragonknight is significantly helping our sustain. So in order to
help that even further, generating ultimate quicker is extremely beneficial. So this is the first reason why on a DK I'd definitely like to choose Nord as my first choice. The other reason is that we do also get the physical and spell resistances. We get 2,600 of each, and this is also helping to go towards our resistance cap. So it is also very nice on a tank. So these two main reasons, as well as the 1k max health and the frost resistance that we get as well, overall it does make it the best choice for me on a DK tank. An alternative race choice to choosing the Nord is to go with Imperial. Rather than giving you the ulti generation and the resistances, the Imperial is going to focus more on your sustain. So we're going to get max health and max stam, and then we're going to also get the red diamond passive as well, which is going to reduce the cost of all of your abilities by 6%. So this is also really nice because it is going to help your sustain generally 100% of the time. And what you can do instead is put other things into your resistances, such as more reinforced traits on your body pieces, or make sure that you're always running the fortified CP as well. For consumables, you've got a couple of different options. You have food that's going to give you max resources, such as Bewitch Sugar Skulls and Longfin Pasty with melon sauce. These two foods are going to give you max health, max mag, and max stam. The more expensive option of Bewitch Sugar Skulls also is going to give you an element of health recovery as well. The price difference between the two is not that significant, so I personally would run Bewitch Sugar Skulls. Option number 2, if you don't want to go for a food that's going to give you max resources, is to run one that's going to give you recovery instead. So option number 1 is Orzorga's Smoked Bear Hunch, and option number 2 is Jewels of Misrule. And again, the difference between the two is this one is much more expensive, but it also gives you the health recovery, and it does give you a little bit more max health as well. So if you can afford this, then this is probably the better one to run. However, there is a much more significant price difference between this and Jewels of Misrule than there is compared to Bewitch Sugar Skulls and Longfin Pasty. So whether you run a recovery food like Smoked Bear Hunch or Jewels of Misrule, or you run a food that's going to give you max resources like Bewitch Sugar Skulls or Longfin Pasty, really depends on your play style. I personally like to run the Bewitch Sugar Skulls, especially on a DK, and the reason is the mag skills on a DK can be very expensive, and you can very quickly reduce your magicka to 0. So by running one with max resources, it reduces the chance of that happening. However, if you prefer to, you can have the lower max resources and have the better recovery by running one of the other two. That's completely up to you and the preference that you run. With the pots, we have normally the Crown Try restoration pots are the ones I use. They're going to give us health, stam, and mag immediately, and then they're also going to give us the 3 recoveries for those 3 as well. So we're going to get health recovery, mag recovery, and stam recovery. If you don't have any of the Crown Try potions, then you can use the player crafted ones, the Essence of Health. There are a lot of different types of Essence of Health, so make sure you use the right ones. You can buy them from a guild store or make them yourself. These are going to do the same thing. They're going to give you health, mag, and stam immediately, and then they're also going to give you the health recovery, the mag recovery, and the stam recovery as well. These are generally the best pots to use. Those consumables are generally the ones that we're going to run for most content on a DK. For our champion points, we're generally going to run the 4 mitigation CP on the blue tree. So Ironclad mitigating our direct damage taken, Enduring Resolve mitigating our damage over time taken, Duelist Rebuff mitigating the damage we take from single target attacks, and Unassailable, which is reducing the damage we take from area of effects. So most of the time these are the 4 we're going to run. There will be scenarios where you don't need to run all 4 types of mitigation. There'll be certain fights where we're not taking damage from area of effects or another component of damage, and you can swap it for something else. But for the most part, and actually 99% of the time, I will just run these 4. On the red CP, you've got quite a few different options depending on the fight that you're in. Fortified is going to depend on how high you want your armor to be. if you're going towards resistance cap, you're going to probably want to run this unless you have a set that's going to give you armor. So for instance, maybe Crimson Oath, that will generally help you get to your resistance cap if you're running reinforced pieces, so you may not always need fortified. I do usually run Boundless Vitality for the max health, so this is one that I do generally run. Fortified I do generally run as well. But again, this one is potentially one that you could drop sometimes, depending on how high you want your resistances to be. The rest that you have access to, again, really depend on the content that you're doing. These two, Shieldmaster and Bastion, work quite well because they're going to increase the effectiveness of your damage shields. So every time you use Igneous Shield, this is going to increase the value of that shield that you get from that skill. And Shieldmaster is also going to reduce the cost of it. And because I use Igneous Shield quite a lot, having this on is just helping my sustain a little bit. For certain fights where you need to move fast, VCR would be another example of this. Celerity is very nice to have. Bracing Anchor can be really good for very hard hitting boss fights. Basically, whenever you block, you're now mitigating even more damage. So it is a really nice one. However, it does make you slow. So if you need to be very mobile in that boss fight, I probably would not run this. So for instance, it wouldn't be good for VCR. It's kind of the opposite of Celerity in that way. Wardmaster, whenever you have a damage shield up like Igneous Shield and you're blocking at the same time, this is going to reduce the damage that you take while those two things are true. So it is also a nice one to run just for extra mitigation. You can run this as well as Bastion and drop Shieldmaster if you need quite a lot of sort of tankiness during a particular fight. And then Expert Evasion is a nice option if you're going to be doing a lot of roll dodging. Every 30 seconds you get a free roll dodge, which is obviously quite nice for your sustain. So again, a lot of these are very situational. A kind of all-round nice setup is the four that I have on currently. So Boundless Vitality, Fortified, Bastion and Shieldmaster. But definitely change them around depending on the fight that you're doing. For our Mundus Stone, 99% of the time I am running the Atronach for the mag recovery, which is extremely useful on any tank class, never mind just the Dragonknight. For the DK it works very well. This is my choice that I will pretty much always run. There are other options again, maybe if you're doing, if I go back to Cloud Rest again, or potentially if you're off tanking Vass, which most of the time you probably won't do on a Dragonknight anyway. You can run the Steed Mundus Stone, but in my opinion it's not worth running the Steed. You're probably better putting Swift traits on your jewellery as an alternative and sticking with the Atronach. So overall, this is going to be our best choice for Mundus Stone. For our attributes, this is going to change quite significantly depending on the gear that you're running, the way that you've set your tank up, and also on where you want your max resources to be. So in this particular case, I'm running a dungeon setup, so I'm aiming for about 37k health. When I'm doing trials, I normally go for over 40k, but for dungeons, I aim for around the 37k mark. So the first thing I've done is I've got all my gear on, I've got all my glyphs on, and I'm setting my health attributes until I see my max health is just over 37,000. Then I've put some into mag to get me basically 20,000. I am 31 away from 20,000, but that's okay. I'm aiming for about the 20,000 mark. And then I'm going into stamina on all of the rest, so I've got nice high stamina. For my dungeon setup, I am running Coagulating Dragon Blood, which means that I want to have higher stamina to make that heal more significant. In a trial situation, what I would do is I would put attributes into health until I reach about 40,000, and then I would put the rest kind of evenly into mag or stam to make sure that my maximum magicka and my maximum stamina are close to the same value, with my stamina being very slightly higher. So it really depends how you want to set yourself up, but for me personally, dungeons I aim for 37k health, trials I aim for 40k, and then I go high max stamina on dungeons, and on trials I have my stam and my mag quite close together when I look at my character sheet. While we're on the character sheet as well, you can see my spell and physical resistances are around about the 24,000 mark unbuffed. When we use the skills that we talked about before, hardened armor for our major resolve or balance, and resolving vigor to give us our minor resolve, we can see that we're around the resistance cap of 33,100. We're a little bit over on spell and a little bit under on physical, and the way that that's all balanced is I do have my major resolve, my minor resolve that we spoke about, and then what I'm running is 3 reinforced pieces to achieve this. So I've got Turning Tide, chest, legs and boots all reinforced. If you run 4 reinforced, you'll be at the resistance cap on physical as well. So generally running 4 reinforced is a way to achieve that resistance cap with fortified CP and on a Nord. Now, as I mentioned before, there's certain gear types like Crimson Oath, which is going to give you 2 lines of armor, and if you're running that, then you'll have more resistances, and therefore you won't need to run the fortified CP, and you won't need to run the reinforced trait either. For my armor, I would usually go for 3 or 4 reinforced so that I can achieve my resistance cap, and then after that I normally put a combination into sturdy and divines. So the reinforced pieces that are most beneficial on a tank is to have on the chest first of all, because the chest is the biggest armor piece, so having it reinforced is going to give you a bigger benefit than having reinforced on one of the smaller pieces. The second most beneficial armor piece to have reinforced on is the legs, and then the third is the boots, and then the mask. So they're the 4 that you would run the reinforced on, and then all the other pieces, so the shoulders, the waist, the hands and the shield, you would run either divines or sturdy, depending on whether you want to reduce the cost of your block more or improve the benefit from your Mundus stone, so in other words having more mag recovery from the Atronach Mundus. So that's generally the item traits that we're going to go for our body pieces. You may not want to put 4 into reinforced or 3 into reinforced like me if you don't need to get to your resistance cap, but again you can also drop the fortified CP to do that. For the weapons, we're generally running, as I mentioned before, a poison enchant with a charge trait on our one hand, and the reason we're doing that is to proc our combustion passive that we spoke about earlier. For our back bar, we're going to always go with an ice staff, and we're going to have infused trait with the crusher enchant. And what this is doing is whenever we apply our elemental blockade skill, we're going to reduce the resistances of the target that we apply this to. So that's generally always what we're going to run on our back bar. In terms of the glyphs for our body pieces, we're running generally tri-stack glyphs. If you don't have a lot of Hakajo or a lot of gold, then you can run a combination of either health, stamina or mag. If you have, sort of some money, then try and run the tri-stack glyphs on the big pieces, which are the shield, helmet, chest and legs. These are the ones that give a larger effect from the enchantments, and then the ones that give a lower effect from the enchantments are the boots, the hands, the waist and the shoulders. So you could just run health glyphs on those like I am. For the jewelry traits, you can either go with infused or you can go with harmony. Don't have any harmony on me, but harmony is going to give you resources back every time you pop a synergy, so it is quite nice for the sustain. I will often run harmony, especially in trial situations. I get less synergies in dungeons, which is why I currently have infused on my jewelry. And then for the glyphs, you can either go with tri-stat recovery like I'm running, you can go with mag recovery on your glyphs. You can also go with reduced costs of things as well, so reduced cost of stamina and reduced cost of magicka as well is quite nice. And if you're quite new to tanking, you can also run the bracing enchantment, which is going to reduce the cost of your block. So you've got access to a number of different traits depending on how you want to play and different enchantments depending on how you want to play. If you're newer, maybe put 1 or 2 into reduce cost of block. Otherwise, I would usually go with a recovery glyph, or one that's going to reduce the cost of your stamina and magicka abilities.
So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you found the video useful at all, please do leave a like on the video, please subscribe to the channel, and again, feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions, and I'll definitely try and help you with that. There will be more videos coming, there's more build videos coming, there's going to be more tank class videos coming as well, and there'll also be some hopefully how to tank guides as well coming. So yeah, lots to come, and I'll see you in the next one.